Hi everyone, my name is Patrick McGuire, CEO of the North Shore Realtors. In 2023, NSR is celebrating 100 years of the Greater Salem Association of Realtors. Each month we're producing a video chronicling a decade of the association's history, culminating at our annual meeting in October. Today we discuss 1984 to 1993.
We got a call from, I guess it was the National Association of Realtors, informing us that the Greater Lynn Board of Realtors was going to lose its charter. They didn't really have a staff, and it was just a mess. And so their territory, which is primarily the city of Lynn, was going to be reassigned, and it could either be Greater Boston or did we want it? So I asked the board. They said, "Oh yeah, it makes sense. We do a lot of business in Lynn." So we applied for the territory and to get the charter from NAR. And Boston said, fine with us, we got enough. They were so huge. So I physically went to Lynn to try to find the office. Well, they didn't really have an office. They had a couple of cardboard boxes in somebody's garage. Could you believe it? And I was looking through, they were primarily membership applications, really, that was it. And I said, oh my gosh, and they didn't have any money and anything. So we took them under our wing. Nicest people you want to meet. I loved working with the Greater Lynn Realtors. They were so appreciative of anything that we did. I mean, they didn't have a newsletter. They didn't really have educational programs. So whatever we did, they were appreciative of. And I think they were also feeling a little bit like nobody knew them in the community. So I said, we need to have some kind of like a public relations campaign, and we need to have more meetings in Lynn. So we had some at the place called, I think it was called the Porthole Pub. It was, people would know this place. And in the morning, so it smelled like fish, but in the morning, we'd have these meetings. And I said, we should invite the mayor of Lynn to come in. We should invite the local congressmen, legislators to come in with all the realtors and talk about all the great things we're doing, which we did. And then Lynn was having a big anniversary, so I said, why don't we have a poster contest in the local elementary schools, sponsored by the Greater Salem Board of Realtors, and have the children prepare a poster that says something positive about living in Lynn, right on the ocean. And I remember they did it. We had a big contest. Every kid got a McDonald's gift certificate. The mayor came. The libraries took all these posters and hung them up, put them in the storefronts. Realtors put them in their buildings, in their windows. And it raised the profile of the Lynn Realtors, and it created a really great bond with the Greater Salem Board and the Lynn Realtors. And of course, we brought them to serve on our board of directors. So it was a pretty good transition. Well, then about a year or two later, I get another call that now the Rockport Board of Realtors, they were not going to lose their charter, but they just felt that we could provide more for them in terms of education and the MLS and lobbying, if you will. So they asked if we would be interested in merging that territory. And again, part-time staff person working out of a cardboard box. And they said, we think we have money, but we don't know where it is. Could you believe I had to contact every bank in Rockport and Gloucester and Essex and ask them, if you have any money under the name Cape Ann Board of Realtors? And there was, not a lot, but there was money coming in. So we finally got that situation. And again, those members in Gloucester and Rockport and all that was very appreciative. And our first board meeting was at the Gloucester House. Again, what we said was that we just shouldn't only be meeting in Danvers. We should reach out and meet so that these members truly felt part of the family. What really struck me again about this local association, Greater Salem, is that because they came from Boston, they had a very strong government affairs program. I mean, they were right down the street from the State House. So they had a very strong government affairs program. When I came to Greater Salem, they also had a pretty good relationship with their local legislatures. I think I hired the first government affairs director, was the David King. Great, did a wonderful job. And I remember interviewing Ed Markey. He was congressman, and he came in, and we were interviewing him whether we should support him or not, and there was some pushback from some members. They didn't like him, whatever. And boy, he read us the riot act because he told us all the great things he had done for the real estate profession, which of course was absolutely true. So, we decided, yeah, we better support it. Well, now you can see he's our senator and still a great friend to the Realtor family. But the other little local associations around us, they didn't realize what an important role the Realtor organization plays, having a strong relationship with the people who are making the rules and the regulations that impact on their business. David King, you just point him in the right direction and he goes, and he did it. I mean, he got it. And I think his background might have been in communication, but I think he understood the importance of creating that relationship. Apparently, it was one of the longest running lawsuits in the country. And there was a man Wells Real Estate, who refused to join the association, but wanted access to the MLS, or, was accusing the association of hurting his business, a restraint of trade, if you will. Well, so he filed suit. And the National Association of Realtors stepped in because they were going to help us defend the suit, because they said, this has nationwide implications. If you want access to our services, you need to join the association, pay dues, and agree to abide by our code of ethics. Now, this man did not want to do that. And so finally, after many, many years of this conversation going back and forth, it came to trial. So because I was the EVP at the time, I got called into the courtroom, federal court, because I think it was a federal case, to talk about, why did we not let this man, have access to the system. And I remember when he came to court, he came like in a wheelchair, with a cane, like showing that he was really, hurting, and that we had hurt his business, because this time he had gone bankrupt because he wouldn't cooperate with anybody else, because he wouldn't share any type of commission in terms of buyer-seller type of thing. So he really had no case, but he made a big deal out of it. And he was also saying that there was price fixing going on. We said, no, there's no such thing. Realtors can negotiate. So the judge said to me that I had to bring in all these listing sheets going back maybe 10, 20 years. So when I got on the stand, the judge said, and Mrs. Todd, did you bring all of these listing sheets going back all these years that we designated? And I said, no, sir, I did not. He said, why not? I said, well, they were kept in the basement of our building, and there was a big flood in Salem at the time, or the Danvers area, and all of these boxes with all these listing contracts in them became soaked and waterlogged. And before you gave me the subpoena, I didn't know, so we had them all thrown away because it was mold, it was horrible. So we threw them all away. So Mr. Wells now thinking, we got her. And the judge said to me, oh yeah, I remember that flood, because in the Salem courtroom, or the registry of deeds, we lost a lot of information ourselves because of this flood. So I said, well, it's the same one. He goes, okay, case dismissed.
Everybody in those days worked for the seller, and that was kind of beat into our heads. Hey, don't forget who you work for. You work for the seller. And there is no one that was in real estate back in the 80s and the 90s that didn't know we worked for the seller. You just knew that. And that was a little difficult, because I'd find myself really developing a relationship with buyers that I'd be driving around in my car. And I'd also always tell them, and we did that in those days, we'd say, don't tell me anything you wouldn't tell the seller, because I work for the seller. That's what we verbally told home buyers. But despite that, you're driving them around in a car looking at properties, and they're chit-chatting in the back seat, and you hear things that they would not tell the seller. So then there was this dilemma of, what do I do with that? I went to an NAR convention. The convention, I believe, was in California, and I met some California folks and some Texas folks that were doing buyer agency. And I said, wow, you advocate for the buyer. And it really had an appeal to me. So when I came back after the convention, I started talking to the broker owner of the real estate office I was in, and said, I'd really like to do this. And he was pretty accommodating. So he said, well, let's give it a shot. Interestingly, I had to make sure that every company that I brought a buyer to realized that I was rejecting sub-agency. and that I was working on the buying side rather than on the selling side. How can you work for the buyer? You can't work for the buyer. I remember actually coming to this very board back in the I think in '90, and saying, look, the code of ethics says that we should really try to make sure that all parties are represented in a real estate transaction. And the response was, yeah, but that's talking about the seller. No, it's saying everyone needs to be represented in a transaction. And if a seller or a buyer want that, they should be able to get it. So my point was, I will not work for sellers because it would be a conflict of interest, but I'll work only for buyers. We were the only ones doing buyer agency, and so that's why. Later on, the concept was accepted.
National came down and said, you have to represent one of the other people. Then I contacted the Salem board and said, we no longer offer sub-agency. So if you're showing our property, you're either a facilitator or you represent the buyer, but you are not a sub-agent. And I put it on all my listing sheets. Raised such furor because everybody was used to using sub-agency.
Where the attorney for the Mass Association of Realtors was basically advocating for what we were doing. The attorney was saying, you know, when you're dealing with a buyer's agent, they're relieving you of a lot of liability. It became helpful, and then eventually all companies got it. So now when I have a class here at the North Shore Association, I'll ask how many of you are in an office that will represent buyers or sellers, and everybody raises their hand because both today can have an advocate in a real estate transaction.